Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
My fellow Americans, we are now in the midst of a war. When we resort to force, as now we must, we are determined that this force shall be directed toward ultimate good, as well as against immediate evil. We Americans are not destroyers, we are builders.
In 1941, fledgling writer J.D. Salinger submitted his first short stories. He didn't give up. He next sent in a story called Slight Rebellion Off Madison, about a disaffected teenager named Holden Caulfield. Except, then the attack on Pearl Harbor went messing with his literary career. The New Yorker postponed publishing the story until 1946. So instead, Salinger enlisted in the army, fighting in the invasion of Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge, and made friends with Ernest Hemingway, who was working as a war reporter in Paris. The two became pen pals. Pearl Harbor sent the U.S. into World War II. In Honolulu, 1 million sailors poured ashore and into tattoo parlors. Sailors got tattoos that honored their ships and their country, their mothers and their darlings. The brokenhearted tattooed the names of those who had rejected them. Tattoo artist Sailor Jerry dominated Hawaii. Burt Grimm, who claimed to have tattooed Bonnie and Clyde, was in Long Beach, and Cap Coleman was in Virginia. Coney Island had the legendary Professor Charlie Wagner. By law, you couldn't fight in the war if you had an obscene tattoo, and so Wagner would often be hired to do cover-ups. He was also the go-to man for sideshow tattooed ladies. Mae Vandermark was only 20 when she'd appeared at his parlor 15 years before. She'd been working as a stenographer, but figured she'd make better money and see more of the world as a performer. Wagner inked 6 former presidents on Mae's chest, the national Capitol on her back, and all of Hollywood across her limbs. Total cost, $150. So enchanting was the finished masterpiece that one of Mae's fellow performers, Mr. Alexander the Rubber Man, fell hopelessly in love with her. A photo was taken at her inaugural show of the two of them standing side by side, and afterward, he'd always carry the picture with him. Mr. Alexander was the best in the business, with an arm stretch of 12 inches and neck stretch of 7. Never did his neck stretch longer, though, than when his Mae was performing nearby, as he craned and craned to catch a glimpse of her and her glorious tattoos. From their bunks, Army men had an easier view of their dream girls, pin-ups. 50 million photos of Rita Hayworth, who was then married to Orson Welles, would be sold.
Rosebud.
Betty Grable got 50,000 requests for her pin-up a month. The smallest size it came in was 2x3, which could be carried in a soldier's pocket next to his heart. Back home, millions of women welded, stamp-pressed, poured molten lava, and built planes and tanks and bombers. They proved they could do a man's job and do it well. Once the men came home, though, they took all their jobs back. Boo. In April 1945, FDR died. 17-year-old Stanley Kubrick sold his first photo of a broken-hearted news vendor's reaction. That June, the Trinity test ushered in the atomic age in the New Mexico desert. While watching the explosion, J. Robert Oppenheimer was flooded with relief. It worked, he said. Years later, the tortured Oppenheimer would recall the words of Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita. Now, I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. The New Yorker printed J.D. Salinger's A Perfect Day for Banana Fish in 1948. It was about a World War II veteran named Seymour Glass, who spends the day on the beach with a little girl before going to his hotel room and committing suicide. It would be the first of 7 stories that Salinger would write about the Glasses, a family of retired vaudevillian parents and their brood of child prodigies. The Rubber Man's story ends with a similar fate. One night before going on, his love unrequited, he took strychnine and died. His last words were, "Don't blame Mae. If that's too dark for you, we can always give you the Hollywood ending."